Modern men walk through the world like ghosts. They're physically present but existentially invisible to everyone around them. They scroll through the days, game through the night, and work themselves to the bone while their inner loneliness grows. If you're a man who's been feeling completely directionless or full of intense energy with absolutely nowhere to put it, you're not failing. You're caught in a trap you aren't aware of. The exhaustion you're experiencing isn't a personal flaw. It's caused by something far more dangerous. And it's something you can break out of with a conscious act of will once you understand the mechanism holding you in. Now, look at me. I'm clearly not a man, but as a former university professor with an Ivy League PhD who spent a decade researching the psychology of gender, I studied exactly how modern men are starving for true direction, purpose, and significance. I have been raised like a man to bottle up emotions, endure, and just keep working. So I know the exact psychological weight you're under. Your masculine drive has not been destroyed. It hasn't changed. The system surrounding it has. And the point becomes how to retrieve it in a world that sees it as toxic. Think about where this design actually began. Enter a typical third grade classroom. A young boy, a bit disheveled, sits at a wooden desk covered in old chewed gum. He's been forced to sit there completely still for 5 hours. Every cell in his body is vibrating with restless energy. He wants to run, play outside, build, wrestle, compete. He has this raw, thick vitality that is part of his natural makeup. But in that room, in that classroom, that vitality is not an asset. It is a behavioral problem. He's trying to pay attention, but the energy in his small body is building. He starts tapping his pencil on his desk, tap, 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 tap. Then he leans his chair back on two legs, feeling the thrill of gravity. He crumples up some paper and tosses it at a classmate. He just wants to play. He just wants to express his vitality. But at the front of the room, his teacher, Mrs. Weaver, notices him. All of a sudden, she stops speaking mid sentence, her chalk hovering over the blackboard. She turns slowly, her face tight. She looks directly at him and says, "Put your chair down." Immediately. And just like that, the classroom becomes a public courtroom. He has just been taught in a single second that his natural physical energy is something shameful. They label him as restless, difficult, hyperactive. They might even suggest medication to chemically quiet the exact biological engine that's built to drive him forward. He's taught at 9 years old that his natural strength, his curiosity, and his competitive drive are defects. To be a good boy, he must learn to sit still, suppress his instincts, and comply with a system designed for quiet passivity. How many of you have been through the exact same scenario? How many of you have been told that your natural masculine vitality is a liability, something to tame and repress? Modern men are told that their natural masculine vitality is like a disease they need to get rid of, and that the only way to cure it is to become softer. They're told that to be a good partner, a good employee, a good citizen, they need to be calmer, to yield, to listen, to endure the endless sterile grind without making waves. And men, let's be honest, are exceptionally good at just taking it, at burying their frustrations, swallowing their anger, and accepting the lie that their natural masculine edge, their raw assertion, their competitive drive, their protective instinct is a liability. Something dangerous and needs to be managed, de escalated, and filed down until you're completely smooth and tame and harmless. But your body recoils because it remembers a primal reality, one where your power wasn't domesticated. If being quiet and agreeable could make a man whole, you would be thriving. Instead, you're suffocating. Here's the cold truth the modern world won't tell you. When you spend years trying to be harmless, you don't actually become a good man. You just become a weak one. You become a passive spectator in your own life, holding your breath, trying not to offend anyone, while your vital energy slowly turns inward and rots. The restlessness keeping you awake at 2 a.m. isn't a behavioral issue. It is your biology screaming because it was built to conquer and protect, and you have put it in a padded cell. You don't need to soften your edges. You need to find something heavy enough to demand them. You don't need less weight. You need more weight. Weight that matters. Masculine strength was never meant to be neutralized. It was meant to be deployed. In our effort to make men safe, we have stripped them down of their heroism. Look at what Odysseus does when he encounters the sirens. They offer him total comfort, total pleasure, and then escape from his struggles. But instead of yielding, instead of softening, he has his men tie him to the mast of his ship. This is an incredibly important act, and not for the reasons that you think. He anchors himself to something heavy to preserve his strength, so he can stay locked onto his mission, which is to go back home to his wife Penelope. But today's men don't have a mast to tie themselves to. Society has told them that wanting to be powerful, to lead, or to stand out is toxic. The only problem? A man without a mission doesn't become peaceful, he becomes desperate. When an ordinary man has no clear battlefield, no clear objective, no clear mission, unlike Odysseus, his raw masculine energy does one thing and one thing only. It turns inward to destroy. You know this type of empty man. He channels his energy into video games, staying up until 3 a.m., screaming at a screen, sweating over a digital rank that has no meaning, because his nervous system is desperate for the thrill of a victory, even if it's a fake one. He channels it into self-sabotage, quietly blowing up his own relationships because he doesn't feel worthy, picking stupid, meaningless fights with his spouse, or drinking himself into a stupor just to create some noise, some chaos in a life that has become suffocatingly flat. Or he channels this undirected energy into some sort of like quiet, twitchy mania, that low level background anxiety that makes him pace his apartment, obsessively check his phone every 40 seconds, and feel like he's constantly running out of time when he has absolutely nothing to do. To retrieve their strength, modern men have to stop trying to be harmless and start trying to be effective. You have to stop asking, how do I keep everyone happy? And start asking much more important questions, such as, what is a problem in my world that is big enough and hard enough to actually require my strength to solve? Who is relying on me to be strong? And what happens to them if I remain passive? What is the hard, uncomfortable truth I am avoiding right now just to keep the peace? The moment you stop trying to quiet your inner fire and instead give it a worthy, meaningful, real-world target, the ghost disappears. You stop being invisible Even if no one sees what you're doing, that's not the point. You don't need to be cured out of your masculine drive. You just need to give it a mission heavy enough to carry. But here's where the boy from that third grade classroom runs into a dangerous wall. He realizes he's trapped. He realizes he needs a mission. So what does he do? He opens his laptop, he goes to YouTube, he buys a course, he listens to a podcast, or subscribes to an online guru who promises to teach him how to be a high value man. He spends hours consuming content about strength, about discipline, about status. He's looking for a blueprint, which is fine, it makes sense. He thinks he's educating himself, but he's actually falling for a massive digital illusion. You cannot learn how to be a man from a screen. You cannot download character. The system has convinced modern men that their isolation can be solved with information. But information is cheap, and algorithms run on outrage. These internet gurus don't want to make you strong. They want to keep you scrolling and buying. They feed you slogans, sell you supplements, and teach you how to argue with people online. All while you remain completely alone in your room staring at a blue light. Manhood is not an intellectual concept. It's not a set of talking points or a political stance. It is a lived physical transmission. For thousands of years, boys did not become men by reading manuals. They became men through direct, daily proximity to older, more seasoned men. They watched how a father handled a crisis without losing his temper. They saw a craftsman ruining a day's work and start over without complaining. They felt the physical presence of a mentor looking them in the eye and saying, "Do it again and do it right." Masculinity was integrated through osmosis. You had to watch it, feel it, and mimic it in the real world. But modern men have zero real world examples. They're surrounded by compliant peers at work and sterile institutions at home. They're starving for models of real grounded strength. And because they have no one to emulate, they stay frozen. The third grade spell repeats in the corporate cubicle. To break the cage once and for all, you have to close the laptop. You have to stop taking life advice from people who only exist as pixel. You don't need more information. You need imitation. If you spend your time around passive, cynical, and comfortable men, you will default to passive, cynical, and comfortable behavior. But if you put yourself in a room with men who are honest, disciplined, and carrying heavy loads without whining, their life naturally becomes your life. Their standards become your standards. You have to actively go out and find better men. Find the older contractor who still works with his hands and carries himself with quiet authority. Find the father in your neighborhood who's deeply respected by his children and still loves his wife without submitting to her. Find the peer who's building something real in the physical world and ask him how he does it. You don't need a guru to save you. You need a brotherhood of real, flawed, heavy-duty men to keep you honest. Modern boys who want to become men need to stop worshipping alpha bros on screen and start building relationships with men they actually want to become. But even if you find a mission, and even if you find better men, there is one final devastating illusion you have to shatter. It is the belief that adulthood is something that just happens to you. We've built a society where we assume that if you just live long enough, pay your taxes, and don't get arrested, you automatically become a man. We think that age equals maturity, but this is a lie. The world is full of 30, 40, 50-year-old boys. But here's the kicker. Modern civilization is never going to initiate you. In fact, the system thrives on actually keeping you in perpetual childhood. A passive, distracted, compliant 30-year-old boy who behaves like a teenager is a highly predictable, highly profitable consumer. He is easy to manage, easy to sell to, and completely harmless. And because there are no clear lines to cross anymore, the good boy conditioning from Mrs. Weaver's classroom remains completely untouched in adult men. You can see it play out in their personal lives every single day. A modern man is exhausted. Every instinct in his body is screaming for him to stand his ground, to say no to a demanding favor, or to speak a hard, uncomfortable truth to his partner. But the desire to be compliant, to be safe, to be a nice guy takes over. So he smiles politely and says, "Yeah, of course, no problem, whatever makes you happy." He thinks he's being incredibly generous, but as he drives away, he feels a dark, heavy resentment burning in his chest. He didn't make a loving choice. He made a cowardly one. He traded his leadership for temporary peace. And in doing so, he taught everyone around him that his word had no weight. He's 35 years old, but he's still the 9-year-old boy sitting with his hands squeezed in his lap, terrified of making a scene. For the vast majority of human history, boys did not simply drift into manhood. They had to earn it. There were challenges, tests, rites of passage, specific painful moments that demanded they die to their childhood self so they could be reborn as protectors of the tribe. Today, you have none of that. If you want to cross that line, you cannot wait for an invitation. You have to build your own crucible. You have to voluntarily choose a difficult path when absolutely no one is watching. A rite of passage is not a ceremony. It's not a celebration. It's a decision to step into the fire on purpose to see what you're made of. It is choosing to master a difficult, grueling physical skill when you want instant comfort. It is staying in the room to look someone in the eye and speak a terrifying, necessary truth when a polite lie would save you. It is choosing to bear the weight of your family, of your community, of your craft without complaining, even when you feel like collapsing. You do not become strong by avoiding friction. You become strong by meeting it voluntarily and by becoming the hero of your own life, especially when no one is watching. The world does not need more passive, domesticated men. It does not need more good boys who have successfully filed down all their edges until they're completely harmless. It needs men who are dangerous but disciplined. Men who know exactly what they stand for. Men who know who they protect and what they serve. Because manhood is not a biological guarantee. It is a conscious daily act of rebellion against a system that wants you weak. It is grown one heavy burden at a time, one hard truth at a time, one act of courage at a time. Stop asking how to make your life easier and start asking, what is life demanding of me today? And then stand up and go do it. Hey, thank you for watching. If what I'm sharing resonates with you, make sure you hit subscribe to be notified when new videos are released. And if you want to go deeper, I share longer reflections, frameworks, and updates in my newsletter. The link is below. This channel is a growing body of work about restoring aliveness in a world that quietly trains you to live at a distance from your own life.